Matt Walsh's first documentary explored a simple but weirdly controversial question. What is a woman? It was a huge success. Coming up next week, Walsh has a new movie that asks a new question. Am I racist? It showcases the insane anti-racism movement that took the country and world by storm, in particular after the death of George Floyd. In the film, Walsh speaks to anti-racist educators and authors, some of whom you may recognize, about their warped racist ideology. But he also talks to everyday Americans. Here is just a bit of the trailer.
Let's be clear what's happening in this country. It's Nazism. Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
Growing up in the 90s, I never thought much about race. Sure, you noticed, but never really seemed to matter that much, at least not to me.
Being a white, straight, cisgender man is the top of the pile.
I'm on the top of the pile. That's me. Am I racist?
I would really appreciate it if you left.
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey.
Can you please leave?
If I'm going to sort this out, I need to go deeper undercover. If I want to be an ally, I need to look like one.
What is racism?
Martin Luther King said not to judge people by the...
Martin Luther King said a lot of stuff.
Is America inherently racist?
What the hell is that?
The word inherent is challenging there. America is racist to its bones. All of the...
So inherently.
Yeah.
The entire system has to burn. And I'm not going to even use save this country. This country is not worth saving. This country is a piece of shit.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Amazing. Joining me now, Matt Walsh, host of the Daily Wire's The Matt Walsh Show and star and producer of Am I Racist? Welcome back, Matt. Great to see you.
You too, Megan. Thanks for having me.
Okay, I watched it last night and I loved it. So I have good news for you because I watched it with a focus group of two. My husband, Doug Brunt, and I watched it together. And I thoroughly enjoyed it for all sorts of reasons we can get into. But Doug Brunt enjoyed it even more than I did because Doug, who is very affable and a great guy, is not particularly prone to fits of emotion in any particular way. And he laughed so many times, Matt. He loved your deadpan, just demeanor, your comments. There are so many good ones where I have so much I want to ask you about because I don't know if any of it was scripted. If not, you're incredibly clever. Just like your matter-of-fact responses to people saying the most outrageous things and your slow-boil provocateur approach to these people. It was true genius, so congrats.
Well, that's great to hear. I really appreciate it. Slow-boil provocateur is probably a good way of describing it, actually. That's a great description of the approach we take in a number of the scenes in the film. I wondered whether you were getting worried at all about somebody blowing their top because you were very respectful. You weren't, in people's faces, but you would keep asking questions when you were told to stop. You would keep pressing little buttons when you could tell they were on their heels wondering what the hell had just walked into the room. And you didn't stop once they were clearly uncomfortable. So when you were doing all of this, was there ever a moment where you were like, okay, now I might be in trouble? There wasn't a moment where I ever felt sort of that my safety was in jeopardy or anything like that. But I guess, a lot of people ask when on this film and also with What is a Woman, that one of the main questions that I often will get is, how do I keep from laughing? How do I keep a straight face when I'm in these rooms? And the truth is that it's, stopping myself from laughing is pretty easy, it turns out, because when you're actually in the room doing this and you're in the room with these people in real time, now obviously this is a movie, so we take, this could be like a 2-hour interaction that I have. We take, there's 5 minutes that appear in the movie because it's a film, but it's pretty intense. And these are really unpleasant people most of the time. So it's looking back at it, of course, it's quite humorous, but when you're in the moment, it's actually not all that funny to me when you're really there and you're watching these people, especially these grifters who who, this is their whole, this is what they do. They take normal people and they try to break them down. And it's like this brainwashing session that you see in the movie that goes on over and over again.
Yes, this is, it takes almost all of the things we've heard about the craziest DEI pushers and puts them together in one movie so you can see this is real life. These people exist. They've been doing this. They are doing this right now. They hate America, and they really don't much like white people. And they would like all of us to feel the same. So of all people to infiltrate their spaces, Matt Walsh gets in there. And he finds out soon into this film, Matt Walsh is not going to be able to do this as Matt Walsh. He's too well known at this point. People are on to him. And that brings me to one of the scenes that has been released and that's in the trailer. This is Matt after he had attended a white privilege grief workshop. And he gets up to leave the room for a moment and he comes back and realizes they've figured it out. Here's a bit in SOT 32.
I did everything I could to fit in. I opened up. I was raw and emotional. I told them about my black friends. It was no use. They rejected me, and they called the police. My mere presence in the room caused them pain. I'll never be accepted if I look like this. If they know that I'm Matt Walsh, I'll always be an outsider. I need to go deeper undercover, a whole new identity. If I want to be an ally, I need to look like one. Like someone who is progressive, tolerant, enlightened. Let me think. Have I ever met anyone like that? Ah, yes. Yes, I have. What is a woman?
Why do you ask the question?
The listening audience. That's Matt getting dressed up just like you described the look you were going for there.
Yeah, that's the thing. One thing I recognize about this film, and many people have pointed out just based on the trailer, is that it's not the most convincing disguise in the world. It's not like, this is not exactly a CIA level operation where I'm going in and facial prosthetics and, a fat suit or something. We talked about doing that maybe. We talked about when we first started making the film, what should I do to change my appearance? Of course, the idea of me shaving my beard was floated, which that's off the table immediately. Other kind of things you could do. And we didn't do any of that. It's just a wig and, and
a bun.
And a man bun, right? Skinnier jeans than I would normally wear. And, white shoes is like, that's the whole thing. And then the question is, well, how did that fool anybody, given that everything's still the same, you still sound like yourself? And I think one of the answers to that is that for a lot of these people, they live in such a bubble. They live in this bubble. They never really encounter in their everyday life anyone who disagrees with them. They never intentionally put themselves in a room with anyone who would ever challenge them. Robin DiAngelo appears later in the film, and
it's amazing.
Which, you could see in the trailer. And I would venture a guess, I don't know this, but I would guess that Robin DiAngelo has not intentionally been in a room with someone who doesn't already agree with her in like 20 years. I don't know. So I think that's part of it, that there's a certain arrogance that comes from being in this bubble, and they just never could imagine that anyone like me would ever be in their vicinity. And so they kind of gave me the benefit of the doubt, and the disguise didn't need to be all that convincing because we're sort of using their arrogance and their kind of false sense of intellectual security against them, I guess.
You've got your skinny jeans, your man bun, and your merce, into which you put How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. And when I saw it, I have to say, I really thought your inspo might have been a character from a different Daily Wire production, Mr. Burcham, in which I play Adam Carolla's wife. He's Mr. Burcham. And it's the school DEI policeman named Mr. Carponzi. Here he is.
My name is Mr. Carponzi. My pronouns are he, him, and z. I'm a heteronormative, cisgendered white male, for which I apologize.
What?
Even got the scooter, which I saw you on in this movie. Tyler Fisher plays that role. Any connection?
No, it's actually, I was amazed when I saw that also in the show, because that's just parallel thinking. I don't know. These two things are being developed at the same time, you know, and I don't know. I guess it's just, if you want to play a crazy leftist, well, you got to have the man bun, you got to have the scooter. So I don't know.
That's what comes to mind.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Okay, so in the movie, and I won't give away all the spoilers because it's fun to watch it unfold and realize how you threaded the needle, but you go, quote, undercover, and you are on a mission to figure out this DEI world. And one of the greatest themes that we just kept laughing was you get your DEI certification at like a workshop, and then you're very proud of your card and use it in a way that is just so perfect, Matt, because you show it to everybody. You're so proud of your DEI certification card. Not everybody has one, as you complain. Not everyone has it. You keep telling everybody. And the joke of it is so on the nose for those of us who have been following this nonsense, which is, of course, anyone can get one. And yet there are all these people who are purported experts in this field who will grift you to the nth degree because they have the little card or they have some diploma that's given them an official education in this nonsense, and they go out there and continue the grift.
Exactly. It's not a real subject. That's the thing. DEI is not a real intellectual pursuit. It's all completely made up and phony. And so being an expert in that is just being an expert in nonsense. Anyone can do it. You'll see in the film that the process that I go through to get my certification it's not a very grueling process.
No,
in fact,
not rigorous.
Not rigorous. It took about 30 minutes, I think, to get the card. And then once it's not like anyone can say, "Oh, but you just got that one on a fake website." That's not a real one. There is no real one. There's no such thing as being really certified in DEI. It's all completely made up, and you know, you just really all it's about is just showing ideological alignment with these race hustlers. And if you do that, then you have as much a claim to being an expert as anybody else in this field does.
Yes. So I love it because not everyone has one. You're very proud. And you then go and introduce us to some of the characters that we've heard of on the news who are pushing this craziness. You mentioned D'Angelo, which everyone must see. If you watch this movie for no other reason, watch it to see the scene where Matt Walsh in his man bun sits down with Robin DiAngelo. I died. Honestly, there were so many great moments in there. Again, we'll keep them a secret. But one of my favorites was when the issue of what is mansplaining. What is mansplaining? And let's just say you're going to laugh just as hard as Doug and I did when you get to that scene. But you did meet a different person who I'd never heard of before named Kate Slater. So before I run this clip, tell us, who is Kate Slater?
Well, she's one of these, she's an anti-racist educator. She is very proud of innovating something, I believe, if I remember correctly, it's called the Anti-Racist Roadmap, I think. And so she's the first person we talked to in the film, and that's why you see in the movie I'm not in the whole costume when I talk to her, because we wanted to start the movie by she has a roadmap. We want to talk to someone who can I'm just starting out, introduce me to the basics of what this stuff is, and tell me where to go next. And, you know, you'll see in that interaction, she sort of lays out a map for me and tells me, here's what you need to do, here's where you go next, here's what you should be doing. And we set out to put that into practice in the film.
Yeah, you did it. But you clashed a bit, not really, but clashed. You highlighted an issue that actually someone I know actually had in their life. They're not woke, but they were getting shamed for this Halloween costume because it's a white family. So you raised this. Let's watch SOT 31 with Kate Slater.
My daughter's 4 years old. I am an anti-racist educator, quote unquote. She's still watching Disney movies, and she is choosing a white princess over princesses of color.
Have you talked to her about that?
All the time.
my 3-year-old daughter is her favorite princess is Moana.
Love it.
It's a good sign.
Yeah.
But then I also thought, there's a little bit of cultural appropriation here. She wants to be Moana for Halloween. Mm-hmm. So how do we navigate that? Do I go and buy the Pacific Islander native attire for my white 3-year-old?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
But I guess what we might call the Moana problem here is what, on one hand, there's cultural appropriation. On the other hand, there's gravitating towards white characters.
Right.
So it's almost like no matter which way you go, you end up back in racism.
We think every space belongs to us because we live in a white supremacist society.
Is America an inherently racist country?
I think the word inherent is challenging there. If we say...
Fundamentally,
yes. America is racist to its bones. All of the...
So inherently.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's so perfect. Your child must love Moana over any other Disney princess. However, not to the point where she would ever actually want to dress like her or model her behavior, because then you've crossed into cultural appropriation. See rule book, section 40, footnote 10. Right.
That's why that's why we now call it the Moana problem. That you're racist no matter what. And the thing is it's one of the many moments in the film where it's funny watching it, and we're supposed to laugh at it. And I think that mockery and laughter is an appropriate response to absurd things, and what you just saw there is absurd. But then on the other side of it, once you go a little bit beneath the surface on this thing, you see that it's actually it's awful too, along with being funny, because this is the damned if you do, damned if you don't situation that these people set up, where no matter what, you're racist. So they start by saying, you're white, you're racist. And then when they have you say, well, what do I do to not be racist anymore? And they tell you what to do. And after you do that, they say, well, good job for doing that, but by the way, you're still racist. And this is a message that they do send to kids. I think I said earlier in that interview, before this moment, I asked her, what's the right age to start talking to your kids about their racism? And she says basically from birth, like for as soon as they're born, start letting them know that they're racist. And again, we can laugh at that as sane people because we realize that it's completely ridiculous, but she's serious. And there are people out there that take that advice and start, hammering this into their kid's head from birth. And it's just it's horrendous.
It's abusive. I mean, that you can see she's happy about it. She's proud that she's disgusted by her child who likes white princesses. She's turned herself into a racist of a different kind. I mean, that's obviously she's got some, I don't know, internalized hatred. Her problem is her problem unless it winds up in my kids' schools, which it has. This is why the movie was so necessary. So was there one thing in particular, Matt, that made you choose this as your next subject after the huge success of What is a Woman?
Well, it's hard to say one thing in particular. I mean, I guess if there was one thing, it would be the big thing, which is in 2020 when just the kind of racial insanity that took hold in 2020 after George Floyd. And a lot of the things that we saw after 2020, none of it was new, really. I mean, even the riots we'd seen before, but it was ramped up to the nth degree. And so that's one of probably the main thing that had me thinking about it. And beyond that, it's cultural, like noticing that I say earlier in the film, you hear in the preview that I can think of myself growing up in the 90s, and it was not a racial utopia. I'm not claiming that. I realize that you had the OJ trial, you had the race riots in LA and that sort of thing, but that sort of stuff was happening. And we're never going to live in a utopia. We're human beings. We're tribalistic by nature. We're flawed. You're always going to have things like racism. That's always going to be a part of the human experience. But my own anecdotal experience growing up in a racially diverse area and going to public school and people of all different races, it was like you noticed when people were a different race, but you weren't focused on it intently all the time. And you weren't sitting around thinking about, oh, am I racist? Was that a racist interaction? That wasn't a part of what you were doing. And recently that's been the case. So it seems like we're very much going backwards. And we are. And that's because people like these grifters that we expose in the film, that's what they want. They very intentionally, they're taking people who otherwise wouldn't be that focused on race, and they're telling them that, no, you have to focus on this. You should be focused on this all the time. You think you're not racist because you don't hate people of other races. Actually, you are. And in fact, if you say you're not racist and think that you're not racist, then that means that you're even more racist than anybody else. Mm-hmm. And they just get people up in their own heads. And it's like this cycle of confusion and resentment that everybody gets caught up into. And it's just evil.
We see Matt go through all these meetings, and we'll go through a couple of them still. But at the end, you teach your own DEI course. And it's amazing because it's pretty disastrous. But you put to use every lesson you learned in the film. That Matt Walsh, who's teaching the DEI now, the student has become the teacher, is literally just doing exactly what you were told to do by all the DEI experts that we met. And then we see it in practice. And it's just horrific to see it play out in front of your eyes. Like, oh my gosh, you won't believe like what people do, what people say, but they do. And I mean, it's almost like you can see how people in the mass psychosis can be almost hypnotized into doing terrible, absolutely evil things if enough people in authority around them tell them it's what's right.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we tried to do in the film. That was the point of the film, really, was to, whereas with What is a Woman, we have this central question that I'm just asking, almost blank slate, sort of basically skeptical the whole way through, asking this question. With this, the kind of twist on that is that asking questions, but rather than remaining skeptical, we decided I'm just going to believe whatever I'm told by these people. So I'll accept whatever they say, and then I'll try to put that into practice. And I'll try to do it as deliberately as I possibly can. And so that rather than sort of explaining why what they're saying is terrible, we want to show people what actually happens when you put this into practice. And that does lead in the end to my DEI seminar that I put on. And you know, you'll see in the film that kind of, it starts a little bit crazy, it gets a lot crazier. We have a couple of things at the end of that seminar that we know we want to try, and we had no idea going in whether the people in the room would go along with it or not. And I really hoped, I think you asked at the beginning, was I ever worried in these scenes? I was actually worried here because in a way it's like, we're going to take this someplace. I hope they don't go along with it because that's really depressing if they do. On the other hand, if they don't go along with it, then it doesn't really work for the movie as well. But at the same time, I'd rather have faith in humanity than have a good movie. And unfortunately, you know, they follow us all the way down the rabbit hole, because what we found is that once you start playing on people's just guilt that they carry around, they'll go anywhere. They'll go along with anything. Yeah. And that's what these grifters have certainly discovered.
They can be exploited. The interviews are so great, and most of the time you sit there thinking, how on earth did he get these? Because you also did press appearances in your fake role, in your man bun. And that's great. You highlight him throughout as like this expert. So how did all that come about, to the extent you're willing to tell me? You know, like, do you tell Robin DiAngelo? I assume you don't. It's Matt Walsh. How do you get these people to sit across from this other version of you?
Yeah, I don't want to go into all of how the sausage was made on that, but I will say that, well, everybody signed waivers, I will say. They all agreed to be filmed, and so that was all above board. But beyond that, I guess I just go back to what I said earlier, that they live in a bubble and they're very insulated. And so that worked against them in this case. I mean, you know, any of these people at any time, they could have put a stop. They could have got up and left. They could have said, I don't want to continue this. They could have done that at any time, but they didn't, because I think, again, they're very insulated from the real world in many ways.
Is there a big reveal, Matt, like between you and your team and the subject? Like before you dropped the trailer, a few days ago, did Robin DiAngelo know that she was part of like a Matt Walsh documentary?
No, there's no reveal. We, the reveal was the trailer, I guess, for them, but not on the day. Robin DiAngelo, we had our session with her, I guess, and she left, amazing. And everything was friendly. I shook her hand and said bye, and we parted ways. That was it.
So all these people find out now or when they see the movie?
Yeah, they do. And so far, as far as I know, none of them have said anything publicly. I don't think we've heard from Robin DiAngelo. I think shut down her Twitter account. I don't know if that's connected, but, seems likely that it was. She hasn't said anything publicly. I don't know if she will. You kind of assume that she will eventually, but also there's not a lot she can say. I mean, she
makes an absolute fool out of herself. Keep going.
Right. And we don't, and it's not like there's deceptive editing where we try to make it seem like they said or did things they didn't do. None of that happens. This is all real. This is what they said and did in real life. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why so far they haven't said anything, because there's not a whole lot to say.
Right. What can she say? She is in the midst of a plagiarism scandal right now that also could be related to the Twitter account. It's unbelievable. Of course, like all these so-called experts we wind up finding out, yes, they're frauds, but they're frauds in multiple ways. And so the Free Beacon did an in-depth report on Robin DiAngelo. Not only is she accused of plagiarizing, hold on a second, I'm trying to find it, but she plagiarized minorities, Matt. Robin DiAngelo, according to the Free Beacon, not only stole thoughts and language from others in connection with her PhD dissertation, but several of the scholars were minorities, including lifting paragraphs, this is attributed to the Beacon again, without proper attribution, omitting quotation marks, and in-text citations, including of an Asian American professor at Northeastern University, Thomas Nakayama, and his co-author, and then of Stacy Lee, an Asian American professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And this is even more egregious because she wrote on her website that you must always cite and give credit to the work of BIPOC people, meaning Black, Indigenous, people of color, who have informed your thinking. When you use a phrase or idea you get from a BIPOC person, credit them. Otherwise, Matt Walsh, you're guilty of white privilege and racism.
Exactly. Well, I will say, slightly in her defense, that she's probably not the first white person to copy off an Asian person to finish an assignment. I might have done that a time or two myself when I was in high school, but really in this case, it's easy to see how that happens, and I'm sure that there's plagiarism. I don't know this for a fact, but I feel pretty confident that if you were to check many of these prominent anti-racist scholars and do a little plagiarism check, you're probably going to find a lot of it. And the reason is that, again, it's not a real subject. Like there's not a lot to say. It's also empty and fake that all they're doing is just recycling kind of the same idea. Really, with these anti-racist people, there is one core idea. There's basically one insight, which is not really an insight because it's not true, but their one core idea is that white people are inherently racist and are the oppressors of history, and everybody who's not white is the victim. And that's not even, a straw man or trying to oversimplify their point of view. That is their point of view. And that's really it. Everything just kind of grows from that root. And so in any paper, if you're to sit and read, I actually read Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, in preparation for our interview with her. And it's really just that. It just circles around that idea over and over and over again. It's not surprising that they end up recycling each other quite a bit.
The only person you didn't get, I assume you tried for, was Ibram X. Kendi, who he's like Kamala Harris in his aversion to sit-downs. He will not talk to anyone or debate anyone. That guy will only go into the safest of safe spaces. Doesn't matter if you're black, white, conservative, liberal. I mean, he just doesn't talk. He puts out his books and he lets that nonsense stand for itself.
Yeah, he does, and we did reach out to him, and we found that Kamala Harris is a good analogy, that he's just not. He's very, very careful about who he sits down with, which is why you don't see him pop up in very many interviews at all, and that's because maybe he has a certain amount of self-awareness that Robin DiAngelo doesn't, in that if I were to try to read his mind, maybe at some level he recognizes how thin and shallow a lot of this stuff is, and he knows it doesn't stand up to scrutiny, so he's careful about subjecting himself to it.
Mm-hmm. Unlike Robin DiAngelo, who talks a lot and charges a lot of money, including $15,000 to the Matt Walsh team. But that's the lead. You got off with a bargain, let me tell you, Matt Walsh, because her therapeutic workshops can cost up to $40,000. She makes almost $1 million a year in speaking fees. She is she's in the top 1% of American earners. She has now 3 houses worth millions of dollars. So her grift is quite effective. And all you need to do is say things like this, which she said on a webinar in March of 23. And you too could have several $1 million homes and be on the New York Times bestseller list for years. SOT 35.
I'm a big believer in affinity space and affinity work. And I think people of color need to get away from white people and have some community with each other.
Just got to get away from us. We're so annoying, and especially Robin DiAngelo, for that matter. Let's take a quick pause, and then we'll come back, and we've got to talk about the round table. The audience is going to remember this. Those crazy lunatic women who will charge you $5,000, I think, to sit around your dinner table and tell you what a racist you are. Matt Walsh infiltrated one of those. It had the most hateful people of all the hateful people in the movie, and it was fascinating to watch. We've got a clip. More with Matt right after this quick break. So we love our dogs in our household. Even Strudwick, he's sweet and he's kind of a mess, but I absolutely adore that thing. He's such a good, terrible, great dog. Anyway, I can't imagine life without Strud and Thunder. They've got a great life, but some dogs, as you know, are not so lucky and they need our help. Okay, that's why I am very happy to tell you about Delta Rescue. Now, whenever you're going to donate to any sort of an animal shelter or group that purports to help animals, you've got to hear the words no kill. Otherwise, you're donating to an organization that might end that dog's life if they can't find him a home. But Delta Rescue is the largest no kill, care for life animal sanctuary in the world. They've rescued thousands of dogs, cats, and horses too, and they provide all of these animals with shelter, safety, and most of all, love. They've been doing it now for more than 45 years. Aw, look at these videos. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions to stay open, and giving can bring tax benefits to you too. Speak with your estate planner about how you can grow your estate while helping animals in need. And check out the estate planning tab on their website to learn more. We love our Thunder and our Strudwick, but Delta Rescue will help the pups who don't have love and need it. Visit deltarescue.org today to learn more. That's deltarescue.org. If you're tired of the same old coffee from those mega corporations pushing their woke agendas, listen up. It's time to take a stand and support a brand that truly embodies American values, Blackout Coffee. These guys stand with hardworking Americans who believe in family, faith, and freedom. They roast some of the most incredible coffee you will ever taste using only premium grade beans, roasted, and then shipped to you within 48 hours. And for the cold brew fans, Blackout Coffee is excited to announce the launch of their 2 new ready-to-drink cold brew coffee latte options. Don't settle for less. Make the switch to Blackout Coffee. Head on over to blackoutcoffee.com/MK or just use the code MK when you're checking out for 20% off your first order. blackoutcoffee.com/MK. The code is MK. Join the movement. Taste the difference. Remember, with every sip, you are supporting a brand that stands for America. Be awake, not woke. Here is that clip I promised you before the break as Matt, in waiter gear, infiltrates one of these "you are a racist" sessions where you can pay somebody $5,000 to tell you those horrible things about yourself and your country. Watch this.
White people are starved for these conversations.
We are. We're so starving.
Yeah.
We are so starving for this.
Anyone else want to say anything?
I'll just say one thing. I'm so glad we can have these conversations, and I'll be done. But I'm just so glad that we could all get together to have these conversations. That's all I wanted to say.
Is he an actor? Are you an actor?
Oh, no.
Can you let us, we're trying to listen and trying to have this conversation.
Okay, you know, we're all acting all the time in our lives. And I think that that's part of the problem, you know? That it's like we're all trying to play a part rather than just being real and having these uncomfortable conversations. And that's what I'm always trying to tell people, especially, you know, white women. No offense, but...
No, but see, like, you're a white dude. There's power positions, and, you know, it's... pointing white people pointing fingers at each other is not helpful.
You know, I've been on this journey for so long, and just to see you guys at the table having this conversation has been really enlightening for me. Anyway, I got the DEI certification, and I'm just on the journey. All right, you ladies have a great night.
Decolonize yourself. Do your own white supremacy dismantling. And then you can start to bring in other people.
Can I just say one last thing? Can I just propose a toast?
He's back.
I mean, just raise a glass if you're racist. And that's the thing.
Cheers. Oh, I'm not racist. Let me
To racist. Well, all the rest of it. To racist.
To racists. Who were those two lunatics at the top of the table?
So that's Syra Rao and Regina Jackson, and they run the Race to Dinner program. And that the program is basically they come to dinner and you pay them thousands of dollars, and they'll sit there and explain why you're racist. And that's what they did in that scene. And you know, of course, in real time, it was like 2 hours of this, just them sitting there talking to these white women and just breaking them down, you know, emotionally and intellectually, explaining to them why they're racist, having them confess, you know, instances of them being racist. Really just, it's the most intense brainwashing session I've ever witnessed, and probably the only real brainwashing session I've ever witnessed in real time in the room. And it was pretty disturbing to watch. But, you know, when we decided to make this movie, I had heard of these Race to Dinner things a couple of years ago. And when we decided to make this movie on this subject, the first thing I said, like, we got to get into one of these Race to Dinners. We have to get there. The problem is that the dinner is only for white women, which is pretty interesting. So when we called them and we asked about, you know, is it possible for a man to attend? They said, no, you have to be a woman. But then that brings us back. Now it's like a sequel to What is a Woman? Because that brings us back to the question, well, what do you mean you have to be a woman? What is that?
Right.
And I think if I remember correctly, the way that they threaded that needle, because their real answer was, well, no, you have to be a real woman. But they didn't say that. So they said something like, well, you have to be someone who was socialized as a woman. That's who we allow. So anyway, that ended with me not being able to attend. So we had to find some other way to get in the building. And as it turns out, you know, you can be a waiter serving the dinner and be a man, and that's okay. So that was our loophole that we exploited, and we kind of went into that scene, and I knew that my goal was, well, I wanted to get them to toast racism. I knew that. But before that, I wanted to earn my seat at the table. I had to somehow find a way to sit down at the table, and then I'll know that I've sort of completed that step of my anti-racist journey, which we did.
You nailed it. That Syra Rao is the most hateful person in this entire film. She's disgusting. What an absolute pig this person is. She hates America, and she hates whites. I mean, deeply hates. Am I wrong?
Oh, I'm not wrong at all. She says it herself. She says it about America. America is a piece of S, I believe she says, her words. And yeah, she's very clear. She doesn't like white people. We know that from the film. We know that from her Twitter history. I think she also has left Twitter recently. So if this film had something to do with that, then I think that alone makes this movie worth it. Right.
Totally.
But yeah, she's full of that. That's obviously what motivates this person is a real resentment towards white people and wanting to find an outlet for that so that she could kind of very thinly veil it in anti-racism or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I walked away with no doubt of my own opinion of her, that she hates whites, hates America, and keeps finding these suckers like these poor women. I'm sorry, but they're pathetic too. Every single one of those women is absolutely pathetic for agreeing to this, for paying this money, and for letting this woman speak to them that way. I have half a mind, not for a documentary, but just for kicks, to invite her. I have a couple of different places where I spend my time, and she wouldn't know it was me. And I'll just show up, and then she and I can do battle. It'll actually be really fun. I'm a white woman. Go ahead and reform me, Syra. Let's see how it goes. I think it's going to be fun for us both. She was so annoying, but seeing you needle her and like tweak her and ultimately expose and thus embarrass her is very gratifying. That's how you wind up feeling at the end of this, even though there are infuriating moments, like when seemingly normal people sign a petition to change the George Washington Monument into
the George Floyd Monument. Yeah. and by the way, that was another one. We went into that. We wanted to do this petition in D.C. And I honestly, I was like, nobody thinks of me as being optimistic, but I discovered making this movie that I was an optimistic person, because I honestly, we went to do that scene, and I was saying to the crew, like, I don't know if anyone's really going to sign this. Like, is anyone really going to sign a petition to change? Yeah, maybe you could get people to sign a petition to take George Washington's name off the monument, but to replace it with the George Floyd Monument, who would sign it? And we found that our problem was the opposite. We were having trouble finding anyone who wouldn't sign it.
Oh my gosh.
Just the vast majority of people we stopped, white or black, they were, yeah, absolutely. They were ready for it. They thought it was a great idea. And I find that, incredibly depressing, I have to say.
That webinar that we showed the Robin DiAngelo clip from, there was good news in that thing. We aired it in March of 2023 on the show because she and these other DEI leaders are lamenting their loss of power. They could feel it by March of 23, starting to wane, their influence starting to wane. And so is there any good news in all of this in your travels? Did you see some shoots of grass, shoots of green there on this nonsense losing power and starting to ebb?
I think so. I not so much in making the movie. Most of the places that we went to and the rooms that we were in were all people that were true believers. So not a lot of light peeking through the darkness there. But culturally, yeah, I think that look, just the fact that everybody has heard of DEI, and I think the vast majority of people have a negative. It has a negative connotation for the vast majority of people. That alone is a pretty good sign that DEI is reaching its peak. I think if you got 100 random people into a room and asked them how many of you have heard of DEI, probably 98 of them will say that they've heard of it, and most of them will sort of say while rolling their eyes, because they see it as either a silly thing or something worse. So I think it's reaching its peak. But what you have to look out for is, okay, eventually DEI goes away. Nobody talks about it anymore. All the DEI initiatives go away because it's just, people see it as so ridiculous and toxic and harmful. But what you have to look out for is the people who promote this stuff, they're not going to go away. So they're going to try to repackage it as
it's
something
already
else.
being rebranded. They're calling it now belonging at the New York City schools.
Well, there you go. The belonging. I mean, to me, that sounds even creepier somehow. So the repackage to me always sounds worse. But yeah, exactly. So they take it, they get rid of DEI, but they don't really get rid of it because the ideas are still there. And the ideas really are so embedded, especially in the academic world, especially in academia and in the school system, that, to really root those out is going to take, that's a years-long process, really.
And in the Democrat Party, where Matt Walsh infiltrated the DNC when it was held in Chicago as your alter ego, as your man bun alter ego. And we saw a video of you just wandering around behind I think it was a CNN live shot in your character, which was amazing. Here he is behind an interview of Chuck Schumer. So how'd that go for you, Matt? And what did you learn?
Well, I learned, for one thing, that apparently I'm not well liked at the DNC. So I was shocked by that.
Shocking.
I couldn't believe it. So we went to their DNC Expo thing, which is in a different building, and I got kicked out in like 20 minutes, escorted out by just flanked by security guards and cops that walked me out. And they said that I'm not welcome back in the building. But the thing is, that was a different. So they said I can't go to that building, but there's a whole other building where the actual convention is happening, and they didn't say I couldn't go there. So we went there next and just walked around the floor. And as you could, I didn't do it. I just walked around. I actually didn't do anything. And that alone was enough to really infuriate a lot of people on the left. Just my mere presence in the room, which I think is interesting. And also, it's like, what are you hiding something? Shouldn't you be happy that I'm there being exposed to your ideas? Shouldn't you embrace that and welcome it? But they didn't, apparently.
They don't like having their sacred cows attacked, and now you've attacked two of them. So since you made What is a Woman, which really was, genuinely an important film, and really got a conversation, if not started, rolling in earnest in ways that it hadn't been prior to that film, how do you think we're doing on that front? Because I'll tell you something quickly. We're down at the Jersey Shore for the summer. We went to see a play at this little theater down there. It's a cute theater, usually family friendly. And it was supposed to be about the Go-Go's, like Head Over Heels, it was called. And but it was like Shakespearean time. So it was like Shakespearean language, but every once in a while they'd break out into a song having to do with the Go-Go's. So it was kind of fun. Brought the whole family. Next thing I know, some character's declaring herself non-binary, saying she goes by they, them. Then there's another character who dresses as a woman for the whole time in order to see the girl whose father won't let him in to see her. And it turns out at the end, he really liked being both a girl and a boy, and he's going to stay flipping between the two. There's adultery. It just keeps going. And I'm like, there's lesbian kissing repeatedly on the stage. Now, this is not Broadway. This is at the Jersey Shore. And I've got to say, it felt like a real setback to those of us who are on the side of sanity. And I hate to sound like, 200 years old, but just family values. Keep that shit out of the family value theater. I don't want to see it. My kids, because, I do what I do and you do what you do, were laughing. They were looking at me laughing because they knew I would not like any of this. And indeed, they were correct. So how are we doing on that front?
Yeah, I think, in spite of that, it sounds like a pretty grotesque experience. I think that I want to say that generally things are heading in the right direction. We have a long way to go. But I think you can look at it politically, you can look at it culturally, and politically, there have been laws passed in many states outlawing the castration and mutilation of children, which is a big step, not nearly enough, but a big step forward. Republican politicians, for the most part, are much more open about talking about these issues than certainly they were 3 years ago. So I see that as progress. And then just culturally, I think that it seems like more and more people are fed up with this and willing to call it out. Look, when we made What is a Woman, we went around and did man on the street interviews. This was like 3 or 4 years ago, talking to just normal people on the street about their take on this issue. And we find the majority of people at that time, of course, they knew what a woman was and they knew that men don't belong in the women's restroom, but most were not willing to talk about it, or they were giving us answers that we knew they didn't believe. It was clear they didn't believe it, but they thought they weren't allowed to say what they actually think. I think that if we went to those same places and did those same interviews again today, I think we'd find a lot more people who would be willing to say on camera, yeah, a woman's a female. No, men don't belong in the women's room. Boys shouldn't be on the girls' sports team. I think there'd be a lot more people willing to say that. So that's why
one of the main reasons, one of the big reasons is the work that you do. Matt, great to see you. Thank you for everything. Remember, the new film is Am I Racist? And it's out September 13th. Support Matt and go see it. We'll be back tomorrow with Glenn Greenwald.